Gibby getting a look at the 21 cars making up this incredible collection.
No one really knew who Paul Walker was until he died. On November 30th, 2013, Paul left a charity fundraiser for Typhoon Hainan victims in Santa Clarita, California, climbed into the passenger seat of a red 2005 Porsche Carrera GT, and never got home. He was 40 years old. Within hours, the man the world knew as Brian O'Connor was gone, and left behind in a Valencia warehouse was an aspect of his life that no one would have suspected. What was discovered inside that garage? What impact would it have on his legacy? Join us as we reveal the shocking discoveries made in Paul Walker's garage, the day everything stopped. The afternoon of November 30th, 2013 began as an ordinary Saturday. Paul had been planning to buy a Christmas tree with his mother Cheryl and his 15-year-old daughter Meadow when he received a text reminding him that his charity Reach Out Worldwide was hosting a fundraising event nearby for survivors of Typhoon Hainan in the Philippines. He excused himself from the Christmas tree conversation, drove to the event at his car shop Always Evolving in Valencia, spent the afternoon with fans and friends, and then made the decision that ended everything. He and his business partner Roger Rodas climbed into Rodas's recently purchased Porsche Carrera GT to take it for a short test drive on a stretch of road they both knew well. The car was traveling between 80 and 93 miles per hour in a 45-mile-per-hour zone when Rodas lost control on a curve. The Porsche hit a concrete lamppost, two trees, split nearly in half, and burst into flames within seconds of impact. Both men were killed on impact. Paul's cause of death was listed as traumatic and thermal injuries. He was wearing his seatbelt. Neither man had alcohol or drugs in their system. The investigation found no mechanical failure and no evidence of drag racing. The tires on the car were 9 years old. The response was immediate and global. Vin Diesel, who had been on a break from filming Furious 7 when the crash happened, posted a tribute that contained the word "brother." Tyrese Gibson filmed himself crying in the parking lot outside the crash site, and the video circulated for days. Universal halted production on Furious 7 indefinitely. Fans left flowers and model cars at the base of the tree the Porsche had struck, and the memorial grew large enough that city workers eventually had to ask that no more items be left. The world had lost a movie star. The people who knew Paul Walker had lost something considerably harder to describe than that, and the details of what they lost only became fully clear in the years that followed. But if the crash defined the public narrative about Paul Walker's final hours, what happened to his garage in the days immediately after the accident tells a different and considerably darker story about who was watching, who was waiting, and who moved the moment the cameras stopped. The warehouse's revelation. Paul Walker kept more than 24 cars and trucks in a Valencia, California warehouse where a worker named Richard Taylor was employed. Richard would sometimes help Walker care for the cars, and by all accounts he knew the collection well, knew which vehicles were where, and knew the warehouse layout with the kind of intimacy that comes from working around a man's most prized possessions for an extended period. Less than a day after Paul Walker died, Taylor allegedly removed more than 30 of those cars from the warehouse. The collection that Walker had spent years assembling, the cars that represented decades of passion and knowledge and financial investment, was allegedly walked out of a Valencia warehouse within 24 hours of the owner's death by a man who had been trusted to care for it. Paul's estate filed a lawsuit against Taylor seeking restitution in the form of the vehicles or their monetary value. The suit was eventually settled by the Los Angeles Superior Court and dismissed, with an attorney for the Walker family confirming conditions included getting things back. The settlement terms remained confidential, and it was never made fully clear how many of the vehicles were returned in the condition they left in, or whether Taylor had sold any of them privately in the period between the removal and the legal resolution. The detail that the original complaint raised the possibility that Taylor may have sold a few for personal profit means that the question of what Walker's full collection actually looked like before Taylor entered the warehouse may never be completely answered. The man trusted with the cars moved them before the family had time to process that the man who owned them was gone. But what was in that warehouse when the legitimate accounting finally began is the part of the story that stopped automotive journalists and car collectors in their tracks. So, what exactly was Paul Walker keeping in that Valencia warehouse? And why did the people who had spent years speculating about it describe the full picture as something genuinely difficult to believe? What was actually inside? The collection that was eventually cataloged, consigned, and brought to auction was not the collection most people assumed Paul Walker would have. The Fast and Furious franchise had made him synonymous with Japanese performance imports, with Nissan Skylines and Toyota Supras, and the specific culture of the street racing world that the films had built their identity around. What Paul's warehouse actually contained was considerably more varied and considerably more unexpected. The collection of a man who loved automotive history across all its forms, rather than a man who had simply extended his on-screen character into his personal life. There were 5 white BMW M3E36 lightweight editions, a car produced in a total run of only 126 units, essentially a factory-built race car that serious collectors spend years searching for. Walker had 5 of them in a single warehouse, and the speculation about why ranged from investment to a potential racing team he was building before his death. There was a 1980 BMW M1 AHG Study modified with a turbo and racing livery that sold for $648,500 at auction, one of the most genuinely rare automotive objects in private hands anywhere in the world. There was a 1965 Shelby Cobra 427 that sold for $352,000. A 1969 Chevrolet Camaro RSZ 28 Survivor model that fetched $220,000. A 2013 Ford Mustang Boss 302S that Walker had been unable to drive before his death. A 1995 Ford Bronco with only 30,000 miles. A Nissan Skyline R32 race car with a twin turbocharged inline-6. Motorcycles, trucks, a Toyota Tundra fitted out for camping. The man who had made the Nissan Skyline iconic in American popular culture also kept a Ford Bronco and a camping truck and 5 factory race cars from a production run of 126 total units. The Barrett-Jackson auction in Scottsdale, Arizona, where 21 of the vehicles were eventually sold, raised $2,333,450 in total. Every dollar went directly to a trust for Meadow Walker, who used the proceeds to fund the Paul Walker Foundation's marine science grants and scholarships. The cars that Walker's daughter kept for sentimental reasons were not disclosed. The collection that the world eventually saw was already missing whatever she chose to hold on to, which means the full picture of what Paul Walker had assembled across his lifetime was never fully visible to anyone outside the family. But if the garage revealed a collector whose range and depth of knowledge went well beyond what the franchise suggested, the details of who Paul Walker was, outside of both his cars and his movies, reveal something that the entertainment industry rarely produces and almost never preserves. So what was Paul Walker actually doing when the cameras were not rolling? And why did the people who knew him keep using the same specific word to describe what set him apart? The man nobody knew was there. Paul Walker had a degree in marine biology. That detail appears in profiles and obituaries with some regularity, but rarely gets the weight it deserves, partly because the image of an action movie star who moonlit as a marine biologist is so counterintuitive that the mind tends to skip over it. Paul told Entertainment Weekly that he had studied marine biology thinking he would make one movie, pay off his student loans, and go back to finish his degree. The movie career happened instead, but marine biology never left him. He joined the board of directors of the Billfish Foundation in 2006. He starred in a National Geographic Channel series called Expedition Great White, in which he spent 11 days on a research vessel off the coast of Mexico, catching, measuring, taking DNA samples from, and tagging 7 great white sharks for a 5-year migratory study. He described the ocean in interviews with the specific vocabulary of someone who had studied it formally, talking about creatures more alien than anything in space and about the way new discoveries kept arriving that made the whole field feel inexhaustible. He founded Reach Out Worldwide in 2010 after the earthquake in Haiti killed over 150,000 people, traveling to the disaster zone personally after identifying what he described as a gap between the skilled people who wanted to help and the infrastructure that could get them where they were needed. He traveled to Chile after the 2010 earthquake there. He was in the Philippines providing aid after Typhoon Yolanda. He was at a Reach Out Worldwide fundraiser for Typhoon Hainan. On the afternoon he died. His brother, Cody Walker, who co-founded Fuel Fest in Paul's honor, described him to People magazine in 2023 this way: "Paul didn't care if you were the bellhop, or the busboy, or the waiter, some big CEO, or some other famous person. He treated everybody the same." That specific description, the specific equality of attention and respect, is the detail that appears in account after account from people who worked with him, met him briefly, or knew him for years. He also held a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and was awarded his black belt posthumously by his instructor. He was preparing for a car show the weekend he died. He was planning to buy a Christmas tree with his mother and his daughter that same afternoon. The detail about the black belt awarded posthumously by his instructor is the one that makes you stop. The physical discipline he had been building, the formal recognition his instructor felt he had earned, arrived after the person it was meant for was gone. Paul Walker was awarded his black belt the way a lot of what he was only became fully visible, after there was no longer a chance to tell him. If the man behind the franchise was more layered and more quietly accomplished than most of the public ever understood, the people who were forced to carry his story forward when he could no longer carry it himself faced something no production handbook had ever prepared anyone for. So what did Paul Walker's own brothers have to do when Universal Pictures knocked on their door asking for a favor that nobody in the history of Hollywood had ever been asked to give? Cody, Caleb, and the film that had to be finished. Paul Walker had completed approximately 85% of his scenes for Furious 7 when he died on November 30th, 2013. Universal Pictures shut down production immediately and spent months in private conversation with the Walker family before deciding how to proceed. The original plan for the film's ending had been entirely different, a setup for the broader future of the franchise rather than a farewell to the man at its center. When he died, director James Wan told Variety that everything they had been building toward became irrelevant overnight, and that the only question worth asking was how to honor the person they had lost rather than how to protect the franchise they had built. The answer required two people who had spent their whole lives in their famous brother's shadow to step directly into the center of it at the worst possible moment. Cody and Caleb Walker, Paul's younger brothers, were hired as body doubles to complete his remaining scenes. Their faces were digitally replaced with Paul's likeness using CGI technology provided by Peter Jackson's Weta Digital, the same company that had built Gollum and Caesar and some of the most technically complex digital characters in cinema history. Approximately 90 of the 350 shots required to complete Walker's scenes were sourced from existing footage and outtakes from previous films. The rest required his brothers to stand in front of cameras wearing their dead brother's costumes, performing scenes he would never get to finish, in a film he would never see released. Caleb Walker described sitting down for an hour-long phone call with Vin Diesel before production resumed, during which Diesel shared things about Paul that his own brothers had never known. Paul kept a lot of things about work kind of quiet with his family, Caleb told Entertainment Tonight. We were able to learn some things through his co-stars. The brothers described the experience as one of the most significant and unexpected gifts of the entire process, that stepping into Paul's professional world to complete what he could not finish gave them access to a version of their brother they had never fully seen. The man who had been busy filming while they were growing up, who was not always there at the holidays, turned out to be someone his colleagues described in exactly the same terms his family used: generous, equal, present in the specific way that made everyone feel like the most important person in the room. The finished film opened on April 3, 2015, and grossed over $1.5 billion worldwide, making it the highest-grossing film in the franchise's history at that point. The closing scene, in which Dom and Brian drive side by side down a sunlit highway before taking separate roads at a fork, accompanied by Wiz Khalifa and Charlie Puth's "See You Again," produced a specific and immediate emotional reaction in theaters across the world that is difficult to describe without having experienced it. People who had never cried at an action movie cried at that scene. The camera rises above the two cars as they diverge, and the final image is Brian's white Toyota Supra disappearing over the horizon into a light so bright it looks like something other than a California afternoon. The words for Paul appear on screen. The credits roll. It was not just a movie ending. It was a funeral that 200 million people attended without knowing that was what they were going to. While the franchise gave Paul Walker the farewell that the real world had not had time to prepare, the person who has spent 12 years turning his legacy into something that reaches further than any film ever could is the one whose story belongs at the center of everything he left behind. So what has Meadow Walker done with the inheritance her father left her? And why did Vin Diesel walk her down the aisle? Meadow and what he left behind. Meadow Rain Walker was 15 years old when her father died. She had moved from Hawaii to California only 2 years earlier to be closer to him. And by Walker's own account, the 2 years they spent in the same state were the foundation of one of the closest relationships of his adult life. He described her to People magazine in 2011 as someone who appreciates the little stuff, and said the trick to relating to a teenage daughter was simply to listen. She was 15 when the Porsche Carrera GT hit the tree in Valencia, and the custody arrangements and legal proceedings that followed her father's death played out in public in ways that she had no capacity to control and no preparation for. On what would have been Paul Walker's 42nd birthday in September 2015, Meadow launched the Paul Walker Foundation with a statement that said, "Reflecting on my father, I found myself connecting with his passions. His passion for the ocean, his passion for rescuing animals, his passion for helping people, his passion for spontaneous goodwill." The foundation offers grants and scholarships to marine biology students, works with the Monterey Bay Aquarium and the Ocean Futures Society, founded by Jean-Michel Cousteau, and continues the oceanic conservation work that Walker had been doing quietly and without much public attention for the last decade of his life. The Barrett-Jackson auction proceeds went directly into the trust that funds this work, which means the cars in the Valencia warehouse are, in the most literal available sense, still doing what Paul Walker spent his life doing: funding the ocean and the people who study it. In October 2021, Meadow married actor Louis Thornton Allen in the Dominican Republic. Vin Diesel, Walker's co-star and closest friend on the franchise, walked her down the aisle. Paul had named Diesel as his daughter's godfather. The moment, a man who had described Paul as his brother, For 20 years, walking the daughter of that brother toward the altar on the most important day of her adult life is the image that most accurately captures what the Fast and Furious family actually became across the years that followed November 30th, 2013. It was a group of people who lost someone and built something around the shape of what he left. In November 2023, on the 10-year anniversary of his death, Meadow posted a video with a single caption, "10 years without you. I love you forever." She keeps his crystal collection. She calls him her guardian angel. She still posts on his birthday every September 12th. She has built a foundation in his name that funds the exact science he abandoned an acting career to pursue. The garage had 30 cars in it. What it actually contained was considerably more than that. What do you think about Paul Walker's legacy? Are there other aspects of his life that he successfully hid from the world? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.